Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show for the second night running due to some interference last night, and we'll go again. We'll not be deterred by these lame efforts, and they can cause it again and we'll go again. So hope you all enjoy the show. Perhaps this first song is significant. Yes, we've got the power. We've got the power back on, and the people have the power. We the people, not the government, not clowns. We the people. Right. We're gonna tonight's show is like a continuation of last night. The op-ed pieces that I wanted to do, and we're going to at first go into so I can catch up on the Q&A, and I will say a couple of things to do. There'll be a couple of intel bits that are to be added on, but tonight's op-ed pieces will in part shock people. You won't get away from that. Many will say, oh my God, it was all in front of our faces and yet so many of us couldn't see it. I've spoken many times now about seeing the patterns, and once you see those patterns it will reveal further patterns as they always repeat, and then you connect the dots. A bit like the tonight's op-ed pieces is like a mini version of the Russia with Love series I did, which connected so many dots, and the pieces tonight will connect a lot more. Now this show is known for connecting also the sleight of hand tactics and bringing it to the fore, and tonight you'll see the real hidden hand of how they operate, think ahead, plan strategically, and set an intention, and how sadly we the people deliver what they wanted. And it's really time for us all to think and act different. So we're going to start off with the I have to stop saying that, get rid of some of the Q&A. Some questions are better to answer for me than others, as you know. Right, let's get into it. I'm curious, Thomas. We have learned a great deal from you, but is there anything you feel you've learned from your listeners or followers? The reality is that I learn from all people and all situations. It is how you gain real wisdom, by observing. It's not about being the big I am, because everyone has a role. You know, and everyone has pieces of the puzzle. It's just that some are able to connect those pieces a bit quicker than others can. And so everyone's played a role, so to speak. And very little of my knowledge has come from books. I don't read books. I've had an aversion to reading books from a young child. And I just have an ability to retain information. But most of it comes from observing people and pushing mine and the boundaries outwards in many ways, which then is an inwards movement, really. Although it goes out, it's an inwards movement, and that way you capture more of the field. It's like the analogy I gave last week. People see the trees. People in the alt media see the trees, but some of us are able to view from outside and see the forest. Now, whilst you're in the middle of the trees, you're only getting peripheral vision of what's in front of you. You're not getting the full vision of what's outside of it. And that's by observing many people, listening to many people. I'm a good listener. In fact, I've spent more time listening in my life than speaking, far more time. And I watch people in fear, many people in fear, so I don't absorb it, because that's how you learn. I've watched people go through their lives, and some are still correcting it, of being in limitation mode, myself also, so I don't follow it. I see bad habits, bad thinking patterns, both in people around me and also myself at times, and others, and strive to correct it. So in essence, we all learn off each other, and so in essence you have all contributed to my knowledge base. So I hope that answers that question. Regarding the abolition of the IRS and the income tax, since the state of fill in the blank is a franchise of the United States corporation, and the state income tax laws are based on the IRS codes, will not the state income taxes go away along with the federal? No, because if certain things that should have been implemented by now, it's only been 12 months, and a source of frustration at this current time, when the country returns to a sovereign nation, all that skullduggery on state of and Florida state and not the state of and vice versa, and the constitution of and the constitution for, all goes away. So there will be state taxes. What we're trying to eliminate is the federal tax altogether, which is theft, pure and simple, under the original constitution, which nobody alive or listening to this show has ever been under. The last one was 1871, which is kind of significant. Then all that changes. So the state will still collect their taxes, but not income tax, which is federal. We have proposed a 10% spending tax. Now, if the states then impose their sales tax on top of that, that's up to the states. But then, maybe if people suddenly become aware of why all the tax has suddenly changed and some of it being eliminated, they'll look into more the reasons behind these taxes. So if one state, likes of Chicago, is charging 20% sales tax and Florida's is between 6 and 7, maybe those people in Chicago are going to ask why the extra 13 or 14 cents, once they learn that the taxes were largely fake to begin with. Theft, pure and simple. So that's how we envision it to work. Yes, I get all the state of and Florida state and the state of Florida, but with the sovereignty, all that goes away, because that comes under District of Columbia rule, which we've all been railroaded into. That's the problem. I'm not a legal guy by any means. I've only scratched the surface, but that's how I and we see it going forward. What will happen to the social security tax? Well, that is an operational question and I won't be answering. Could you do a small information piece? There's two of these similar. Someone asking about Canada and another one asking about the state of play in Australia. Both of them come under the Crown, and both of them are riddled with colonial psychopaths who are hell-bent on destroying humanity. There's a lot of problems in America and in Europe, but when you consider the population of Canada and the population, despite both being big countries in landmass, the population levels are fairly low, and yet the systemic and heinous crimes that are going on in there are beyond awful, and particularly to do with the children, more so in Canada. Canada, like America, imported Nazi psychopaths. Of course, you've got the Dr. Green program up there, the royals interfering up there with the children, stealing them and disappearing them. It's all documented, thanks to, in some part, to Kevin Annett. But there's other people I've spoken to in Canada, including a member who's just recently joined the group, about how their children were stolen. I've spoken to Indigenous people in Canada and how whole schools were decimated, where they were using them as guinea pigs, given one half of the class TB or syphilis or whatever, and seeing how long it took for them to die, and then put the other half of the class in with them and see how long they developed symptoms. And this is some of the things that have been going on. Of course, Australia was the same. You know, their interference with the Indigenous peoples there, same as what went on in America, all done by the same people. The British, the French, the Dutch and the Spanish, and also to a lesser extent the Portuguese. All the same people went into Australia and did the same thing. What's a genocide? You know, land grabs, history rewrites, you name it. But, you know, you have a president in Canada who's one of the establishment. I mean, how's that going to work? And yet the people of Canada voted for him. Trudeau is one of the establishment families. And this is where we, the people, have to think better. You know, if you're going to do yellow vest movements, why don't you pick somebody out of the yellow vest movement to go and support in the next election and get these people out altogether? Then we can have a real go at changing how the government operates. There'll still be the snakes and vipers that are in there, like what Trump's putting up with. But ultimately, it all rests on we the people, does it not? If you can get thousands to turn up in Israel and Palestine for peace, surely between them those people can come up with one person as a candidate and get nutty arsehole out of Israel. This is where we the people fall short. We don't think ahead enough. It's reactionary. You know, the yellow vest movement, whilst it's great that people are standing up, it's still reactionary, not proactive. And they love reaction because they'll manage it. What we have to do is be proactive. Well, we've got a large body of people together now with a common enemy. Let's replace them with our own. That's being proactive, not reactive. And so Canada's in big trouble. Big trouble, because there's a lot of criminality up there that has gone unhindered and still does, with various MK Ultra style programs in the universities, including the big ones, in fact all of the big ones, and the hidden research scientist elements. Then you've got the SSP on the border of Vancouver Island. You've got the clowns in Vancouver. That is a whole city is a den of iniquity. You've also got the ET base on the southern tip of the Vancouver Island that have messed with a lot of people in Vancouver. I know, I was there. So there's a lot of problems, but the people have to come up with the solutions, not focus on the problems. And this is why I say we have to think and act different. Reacting to the problems is one thing. Providing solutions and being proactive going forward is another. So I hope the people of Canada, it'd be nice if the French Canadians stood up like the French people in France, and then kind of shamed the rest of the Canadian people into standing up also. Because if people in Canada stand up, you can guarantee it's going to be the French Canadians first, sadly. You know, and the Brits and Americans sit there and wait for others. We can't keep doing that. We just can't. So I hope that helped anyway. In previous shows, you mentioned that we as humans are special species because we have the capability of multi-dimensional aspects. That's correct. My question is, are we special as a soul or a vessel? The answer is both, when combined. That's how I understand it. I thought all souls are coming from the same source. How can a vessel make as a special case if that is the special case? Well, yes, all souls came from the same source, but not all souls are going into the same vessel, are they not? Some are going into greys, and some are going into reptilians and dragons and even earth-based animals and mammals and birds. So they're not all the same, are they? They can't be. And like I said, it's my understanding that given all the knowledge I have, is this particular vessel and the souls contained within it are the je ne sais quoi of not only this planet but the whole universe. How and why that is, it's possible, again from my understanding, that this particular type of species was created with all the tools, all the abilities, which then caused envy in some of the other species, which is why we've been attacked. But we should never, in my opinion, go as far down as 3D. We shouldn't have come here. Yes, it might be exciting in certain ways and different in others, but we gave up so much of our knowledge, soul growth, and our abilities to be in this existence. It wasn't a smart move. Yes, there was interference along the way, but the interference can only have taken place if we lowered our abilities, because we had the lot. Telepathy, telekinesis, etc., etc. It was all there, all in the one package. So with all those tools, you can never, under normal circumstances, end up as slavery suits. We gave our abilities away somewhere along the line. Once you start giving stuff away, you end up being used. So if you keep lowering your abilities, and this is why I warn of people being in limitation mode, you're always going to be stuck in the lower vibration, of I can't do this, and it's only little me. You know, that little you had far more abilities than anyone ever created. You've just forgotten. And we have to get back a fair chunk of that. We have to move people or advance people so that they jump the astral and into the mental planes, which is where some of our latent abilities return. Too many on this planet, and it's the vast majority, whether they're organic or inorganic, or synths or possessed, are operating in the low frequency astral level. You don't get abilities back there. They take them. So that's the overall goal. And maybe once the transition takes place, which will happen on an individual level rather than a light switch collective level, because there's far too many here that are just not ready, then we'll realise some of the folly of going this far down. Are the souls different, and are they created for different bodies and different planes? The different body, sometimes this is where the dimensionality comes in. Sometimes we reduce our soul level to then be in different bodies. Now, as for being in different planes, that all depends on the development level on a particular lifetime. It may take several. That determines where you go on the different planes. Now remember, we had the ability to go multi-dimensional, so it's not limited to Earth-based planes for those who have switched on enough of their junk DNA. You can go from here to the universal tree, which is what all the universes stem off. And you don't need tin cans either. So I hope that explanation was good enough. I have a strong attachment to the sun, and ever since I can recall, does the planet or area of space we come from have anything to do with our relationship to the sun? Well, the sun is a portal, and everything comes through there and goes out of there. Some of you will have seen certain videos of objects coming in and out, whether that's a comet or biospheres, largely, which were harvesting centres. But the sun has a connection to all the planets. It's like its offspring in many ways. But the sun also has a connection to all the other suns, including the other two that's directly connected to this one. There's three in all. We just can't see them. And despite some of the fake photography and glitches of cameras, they're not visible as yet. It seems as if one rule or another in this universe blocks decent people, entities from neutralising the sick practices of the dark. That is largely correct. There is an imbalance. Was this universe conceived as a training mechanism for self-restraint against one's reflex reaction in the blatant face of obvious transgressions? The light beings, not necessarily people, the light beings operate under far more restrictions than the dark. They don't care. Now, as I understand it, this whole universe was created as a light only. It didn't recognize dark. And so perhaps new rules should have been made, but obviously haven't, because I've witnessed myself people who have developed some of their junk DNA lose their abilities because they didn't act with personal responsibility with those abilities, and back down to the astral level they went, and into the demon realms and fighting and being chased by all kinds of extinct beings and whatnot. But I think we covered this and the different levels in Humanity Unplugged, either 1 or 2. That tells you the different cosmic laws and how it applies. So if you want to get more details on that, refer to that show. Can these videos be published by THI on your YouTube channel instead of just Shorts playlist and other channels that upload them? It would be much easier and clearer in many regards for listeners and new seekers as we move forward sharing information. I'm not really understanding that question, because the shows are available on the Spreaker archive, all of them. They're also available in its entirety on the Think Different .thepeoplesclub.org, and also the whole archive is on the YouTube. Now, you're talking about Shorts playlist. None of those Shorts playlists are done by THI. They're done by the Lucid Dreamer channel. And some people find them easier than listening to a 3-hour show. A lot of people, unfortunately, have short attention spans. So I don't know how much easier or clearer it can get. You know, we have a search engine on Think Different. If you type in a word Levashoff, it comes up with all the material for that. I think we've pretty much covered things being easier. You can also read through all the intel from May 2017 onwards via the Patreon channel, which has all the transcripts of all the intel and all the op-ed pieces. They're all there. So I think we've pretty much covered many channels, many avenues, and how people can find it and whatnot to date. What is your knowledge about blue light technology in every smartphone and tablet? Not much, to be honest. Sorry. It's my understanding this blue light chip reads our consciousness, and that all smartphones are on or off form a grid to control human consciousness. They've been doing that since the day you were born, before we had smartphones. So I don't see, whilst I'm not saying smartphones are great, you know, there is frequencies in them that can harm. But what you're suggesting is the grid to control human consciousness. That's been going on for thousands of years via the old AI system, the psychotic one. So they didn't need smartphones for that. You know, smartphones, in essence, are a lead-in. Well, it serves a number of purposes. It always is with the Cabal. It's never for one reason. It's always 3 or 4. 1, it becomes a distraction piece. 2, it's invasive in people's lives. You know, 3, it's a tracker. And the hidden reason is to set people on a path into a virtual reality world, which many will walk straight into. So they didn't need smartphones to do that. Is this an off-planet technology, and could the council interfere with this? We interfered with that before the council arrived. The ability to extract consciousness and to interfere on a far more wider scale than they're doing now. This is why there's a big talk about AI all of a sudden. We have to create this AI and we have to create quantum, because they've lost the main AI. It went down in 2013 or 2014. No, it wasn't. It was 2015. Maybe in November we will see the evidence of that. I find the statement you made human against human affairs difficult, because we I'm trying to understand that. It's broken English a bit. Basically, I think what it's saying, we were lied into so many things, and how can the people who say the system built by ET beings still act during the peace treaty? This is going on where people are consistently asking for the council or the UPU or somebody else to come in and fix our problems. And I do understand there is elements, and I have addressed it. I've addressed this question about 4 times now. We've also addressed the council. I personally have addressed the council numerous times that we should get a little bit of interference help, due to the humans here who are running off-world programs and have zero knowledge that they're doing so. It's still their program, and I feel that there should be some minor interference, but everyone seems to think that the council is here to fix all our problems. Well, a lot of our problems have been created by ourselves, whether we like that fact or not. We've ignored too much, and yes, we've been played on because of our naivety. But as you'll find out in the op-ed pieces, it was all there in front of our face. We just didn't look deep enough. It was just too easy to let things slide, which is why the Yellow Vest movement is now a reactionary group, not a proactive group. We have to be more proactive than reactive. Reactive means we've let things go and then we're reacting to correct something that's ran away. It's like the totalitarian creep. The banks, no charges for setting up an account. Then suddenly you've got to put X amount in. No charges for ATMs. Then it's $1. Then it's $2. Then it's $3. Then they're going to charge you $5 for an account. Then it goes to 8, 10, 12 and 15, and we say nothing. We just carry on. Or the cable company just decides they're going to up the prices when nothing's changed. In fact, they've taken more channels away, and we just accept it. These are some of the more minor level things, but if you keep ignoring the small things, the big things you're not going to see. You're not going to get near. And this is what we have to change. Can we combine forces in THI, considering with regards to distributing truth from native locations around the world? Well, this show is fairly global now. There's no question of that. And it's going into places people never dreamt of, particularly myself when we started it. it's up to the individuals in each country to distribute the show. That can be your role in it. You know, we've got people in Bulgaria. Maybe that person in Bulgaria can get the message out more. We've got people in New Zealand and people in Australia and people in Japan. A lot of people in Brazil listen to this show, and a lot of people in Holland, you know, and it's spreading out wider and wider. We've got members from Sweden, many African countries now. There's a large increase in people from Africa finding out about THI because of the work Kim's done with the Man of World Holding Trust there. So, you know, the best thing people can do who are in countries outside of America, which is still 52%, because it's based in America, there's still 48% of listeners that are not from America. And it's up to those 48% to get the message out further, should they desire to do so. Do you know the role of that Sweden and its owners, the secretive Wallenberg family, whose motto is to be without being seen? Yeah. The country with the world's oldest central bank, the biggest banking sector per capita, and because of that, the country with the world's longest peace, even beating the Rothschildian Switzerland. Switzerland is a strange country in many aspects. Of course, one of my favourite groups came from there, ABBA. Is they are part of the Germanic groups that ties in with Sweden and Norway and Finland and Holland, and so Wallenberg family running it is no surprise than the Warburg family running Germany, or the Orange family, because they're all interconnected and they're all linked. So that's the problem that Sweden has, is it's past, you know, a lot of Swedish people, particularly in World War II, were all Nazi supporters because of the Germanic roots. And they have to be aware that because it was ran that country in that way in World War II, all those families that came from Holland and Germany, the House of, whether it's Bavaria, Orange, or some of the others, they're all ensconced in that country. It's like the same as America. We had the same Nazis and Khazarian and Ashkenazi families, bloodlines in America that just totally destroyed it. And it's going to be take time to remove these elements, secretive elements. First of all, we've got to find out who they are. You know, there's a lot of people who listen to this show have never heard of the Wallenberg family. That's how they get away with it. It's like a lot of recently, because of Q, just found out about the Pacer family, who were one of the funders of the Rothschilds, originally anyway. So each country plays its role, and as we find out more about each country, then we can start putting the dots together and come up with some proactive solutions to end their tyranny. Thomas, you mentioned a map of the control system above M. No, M is the top. You and Shane pieced together. There was three of us, Kim as well. Kim had the map. And I would love to see or know more about it. Well, I've said it in a few shows now, that we will, when time allows, because it's not really an important item, it is in some aspects, but it's all about priorities. And like I mentioned last night, I've asked to tell people to stop phoning Kim or stop emailing me with to have a look at or approve this proposal or not, because too much of our time has been taken up by what is essentially not priority in the current moment. You know, we have many hats to wear. You know, I don't just do this radio show, I do a lot more. Some of it gets covered in the shows, a lot of it doesn't. Kim wears many hats also. And whilst that document is important, and it will be an important piece for future historians, so it never gets repeated again. Currently it's not a priority, but eventually what will come out is Kim and I will do a video show when time allows, where people can actually see it, and we can go through the various sections. The rest of it is all the same. Wheel has 4 parts of it, if I remember. Yep. I'm pondering the notion that this is the final exit door. No, you're getting mixed up. It's nothing to do with the Matrix. You're getting mixed up with another op-ed piece I did of the egg timer, of how we fall, and the gate is on the west, is on the left once, and then on the right the next time. You're getting mixed up with 2 pieces. I've managed to astral travel a couple of times, but didn't get a good vibe and saw scary stuff. Do you think there are other dimensions that humans can visit? Yes, there is, once you develop yourself sufficiently to travel. Essentially, you're going to the astral travel, which is not a slight on you, because most of humanity is operating on the astral code level because of the traps and our inability to work on ourselves. We've always waited for someone else to come and save us. It's not Jesus, it's the Lord, it's Pleiadians, etc., etc., or the government's going to fix it, or Trump's going to fix it. When the key is yourself, it always was. Inward, not outward. So you continue to develop yourself, operating service to others more than service to self. You only need 51% service to others to then start to operate in a higher vibration. But again, the problem with humanity is most people are service to self. That's the way it is. That's the way society has been dictated, and we've all fallen in line with it. And it's time we all really took our own sovereignty back and start to develop ourselves. Not wait for somebody else to develop. No. You. This is the key. You are the key. So if you do it, you raise your vibration, there's people in your field who will automatically raise their vibration, whether it's enough to go to 51% others and loving and caring, but it's still a small boost. And if you get a collection of those people, that frequency goes out wider. There are some people who have a radius of 25 miles of affecting those around them. Now it's like the flower of life, and it's like the People's Club donating to or setting up companies where I spoke about the circles. And once you start connecting the circles and the circle gets bigger, we end up with the flower of life. That's how it works. That's the real planetary vibration. And because it happens on one level, it happens on all the other levels. It can happen on business level, it can happen on people level, and it can act on a planetary level. So if you don't want to see scary things, I remember it too well. There's some rather unpleasant looking beings in there. Centaurs, minotaurs, all the extinct beings are all in there. They're all trapped. Some of them are gone now. Some of them are still bound in between certain layers that still have to be cleared, in my opinion. If the clowns don't fall in line with the trust, does Kim have any thoughts on bypassing them and going directly to the people? That's operational, and I won't answer those type of questions. Sorry. I have a question about marriage contracts. Since USA Inc. is defunct and the legal system of admiralty law is as well, and not currently it isn't, we need certain people in high positions to implement it. And as we transition to natural law, what will happen to marriage contracts? Essentially, they are business contracts when things finally occur and everyone wakes up. I think the majority of people will say keep them, just change the intent. You know, I think whilst it's fell away a lot since the rise of feminism, the collapse in marriages has been extraordinary since that time. I still think a majority of people like or wish to get married far more than the ones that don't. So whether it's a contract or whether it's something that's not as harmful, because we don't really know what we're contracting to. Therein lies the problem. And this is when you're getting into word magic, and the piece we did last night is intent. Your intent is to marry the love of your life, hopefully. Not sign away all kinds of other nonsense that has nothing to do with it. So hopefully things will change in those aspects, particularly going back to natural law or common law or cosmic law, whatever you want to call it, just not their law. Depopulation of FEMA. Can you please tell me if Trump is part of this or why he hasn't stopped it? The depopulation, in the broader terms, has already stopped. We should have all been dead 7 years ago. So, whilst there's still ongoing things, again, I had to remind some of the team today, we are essentially less than a decade into changing a system that's been lasting 16,500 years. So that's gone across 2 separate loops, with one loop being 13,000 years. You know, there is, again, I did, it was the piece last night, or the piece last week, of why no arrests. This whole system is designed for harvesting and control. You know, and it's going to take a lot of effort by a lot of people. Now, unfortunately, there's not a lot of people who are prepared to step up, as you'll find out in an op-ed piece later on. As for FEMA, you know, we at the Trust tried our best to replace them in November. But unfortunately, rogue elements within the government and within the Treasury, which still continue, much to our frustration, blocked it. But all the old programs, fear programs that are based on the internet of guillotines and coffins and Jewish-style trains and all that BS, you need to ignore. As FEMA will not be doing that, and they won't be doing mass depopulation either. Did all higher ancient civilizations practice abortions like the Greeks, Romans and Mayans? I wouldn't say they were highest civilizations in any way, shape or form. Some of the Greek were higher. Romans were psychopaths. Pure and simple. Debauchery, all kinds of heinous slayings. Setting fire to people, setting fire to property and stealing land, and then creating one of the most heinous cities ever, known as the city of the Vatican. So I wouldn't describe them as higher. And as for the Mayans, oh dear, Kali-Ma people, ritual sacrifice. I don't think sacrificing one of your brotherhood is something that is higher of anything. And yes, they all had abortions, and most of them didn't work, and generally the mother died, as I understood it. And yes, some of them were sacrificed to the gods. A lot of the tribal people became infected, whether deliberately or not, or taught the Kali-Ma, and the Mayans were one of them. Aztecs were another. Whether those peoples that were originally there in Central and Southern America, who taught them, the Mayans are worshippers of the feathered serpent, and of course the Vatican and the serpent races now becoming more common. But where the Mayans taught by the Kali-Ma people, who when they were exiled out of the Garden of Eden in India, as in Indians, and then went across the Bering Strait through Alaska down what is now Canada and into America. There was Mayans and Aztec people in North America. The Smithsonian and the other clown archaeological people, all bought and paid for by donations of Rockefellers, etc., to keep quiet about ancient history. But they were all here. They were in Florida. There's evidence of it everywhere. But where the Mayans taught the Kali-Ma by the ones that were exiled out of the Garden of Eden in India. Question to ponder. Or were they taught by the gods that came down? Because the whole of South America and Central America all talks about the ET gods that came down. You've got clowns like Wilcock and Gilliland and others that are part of the year of disclosure. They've just advertised some sort of conference in July or whatever this year. You're not disclosing that to the South Americans or Central Americans, because they'll all tell you. But it's an interesting question to ponder. Were they taught by the Kali-Ma people, or were they taught by the off-world people of the ritual sacrifice, or were they both taught that way? So we'll find out one day. When will the med beds and tachyon chambers be ready? No idea. I have no idea whether they... Well, I'm apparently aware that they exist, but whether they work remains to be seen. And the fact who's putting out the med beds makes me very, very suspicious, I have to say. But again, this is should only be used as, should they be real, as temporary technology. We have to learn our own abilities to be able to correct our own illnesses. We have the ability to make ourselves well. You've all heard the saying, if you keep doing that, you're going to make yourself sick. Well, how about when you reverse it? If you keep doing that, you're going to make yourself well. You see how the word magic comes in. People keep saying the same things over and over again. It creates that field. So how about we stop saying that and say, if you keep doing that, you're going to make yourself well. And you'll find that people will make themselves well. And this is where your own physical effort comes in, and we have to get back to using our own physical effort and not relying on the crutches that we've done through most of our lives. It's a common theme. Once you see the patterns, it always repeats. We're always looking for something or someone else or some machine to do things we can already do ourselves if we believe and if we put the actual effort into doing so. I've witnessed it. You know, so if you've got many sick friends, those people have to believe in themselves that they can fix it themselves. You know, certain types of things like the broken bones and whatnot requires some medical help, but the healing comes down to you. But what do? We hand it over to somebody else. We hand it over to the pharmaceutical people to make us better, even though majority of us that listen to this show know it makes you sick. And yet there's still many people who listen to this show who are popping pills. Why? Because we're not thinking properly. The doctor told me that that's going to make me better. No, actually, it's going to make you more sick, so you can continue to buy more pills. All pills are poison. Every one of them. But we all go out and buy them. Not all of us, anyway. I refuse to take them. That's where we come in. So it takes some effort from ourselves to fix ourselves. Can't be any worse than relying on them, can it? If you try. Oh, I can't do that, Thomas, and I can't do this. Limitation program again. I can't. Just take the T away and I can. It's like impossible. You just split it up and it's I'm possible. It's all in the words. What's the best thing we can do to assist you, Thomas? I've had that question about probably at least 10 times, and I've answered it several times now, and it hasn't changed. Work on yourself. And also come up with solutions yourself. That's how you can assist me. Come up with your own solutions, not just the problems. You know, it's not all about me. This show's not about me. This is about you, all of us. What are your thoughts? I believe the politicians will sink themselves. Well, they're doing a fairly good job of that. How can we protect our homes and vehicles? That's a bit more difficult. You can try shield them. Perhaps you need to shield them as well. given two separate incidents, decided to reverse into my vehicle in the past 6 weeks. And no, it wasn't a coincidence. Never is. Thankfully, I wasn't in it either time. But these are the things they do to distract and throw you off your path or out of your zone. And it's happened to many of us who are listening to this show. I know it is. Why are the military tribunals so secretive? They're that secretive, they're not even taking place. There's no evidence whatsoever to support that information. It's all distraction and bullshit again. It's happening, it's going, mass arrests, tomorrow, 2 weeks. It's all there. Just got to do this now. There's a reason why we have more detailed intel than anyone else. It's not something I like to say, but perhaps it gives some people an understanding. When you've got or part of the team that's got the highest security level on the planet, then there's nothing that's not available. And trust me, if military tribunals were going on, we would know. These should be televised. Do I agree? No, I don't agree. A few years back, called for this, and I did an op-ed piece on it. The last thing I want to see is a load of criminals on national TV, on every channel, and portal people babbling about what we already know. And the worst of all, it will involve snake oil salesmen known as lawyers and the bar system all going ka-ching, 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 ka-ching as they argue back and forwards, as you've seen with the Russian collusion. No, I don't want to see that. We know what they've done. The evidence is all there. What should be assessed is, what is their punishment? And what I've asked for, which has been pushed to the higher levels, is for some members of the alternative community to be part of those trials that should be private. And the ones that are selected can do certain narratives back to the alt media to ensure to the alt media that justice, not just us, has been served. But no, I don't want Anne, or whoever's representing Anne, and other psychopaths splattered all over the Portal People TV 24/7. It will become a drama distraction piece when we have so many other things that are far more proactive of solutions. We don't need all that distraction. Just don't. One or two, and I did mention this in that particular show, I think Anne should be made an example of. Hillary, for those of you new, and whoever is representing Hillary at this point should read out on national TV the list of her crimes. That then only needs one of them to be publicly humiliated. Maybe two. I'd add Bush, a representative of the Bush family. Then all the other crimes that most people around the world think are not possible, the levels of child trafficking and sex slavery and all kinds of other heinous crimes that they've got up to, if it's spat out by one or both of them, then that's all they need to know. They don't need, in my opinion, and also in my opinion, they are incapable of sin-eating to the levels that we have. They couldn't handle it. And that's why I think the trials should be private. Any knowledge regarding migraine? Not much. But again, that's something you can fix yourself. Focus on the region, bundle it up, and cast it out. And I always question the medical establishment's explanation on this. Well, you should, because they don't know jack. Sorry. But the reason is they're not taught jack. How can you spend 7 years in training and not teach cures? I'm not joking either. 7 years training to be a doctor and not 1 minute spent on curing. Like I said, there's a reason why they call it practicing medicine. Because that's exactly what they're doing. And yet we put our lives in their hands. I was told the squiggly lights in the sky were white blood cells in the back of your eyes. Or are the source energy? Well, it's up to you what you want to believe. I know what it is. I've told people what it is. If they choose to believe that, fine. If they want to believe it's white blood cells in the back of your eyes, that's fine also. See if we can get a couple of quick ones now. Still only about halfway through the questions, but let's see if I can pick something else out. I hear the central banks are buying gold. Where's it coming from? Looted countries mainly. As we warned, was it about a month ago, 6 weeks ago? They're going into countries and looting the last bits. Again, that avenue will run out, and again, they'll have to come up with some other criminality, and ultimately they'll run out of options. Any progress on the free energy market? Depends on what you mean by progress. Are we any nearer to releasing it? Some ways, yeah. In many ways, no. I can tell you a lot of it exists. There's a lot of patents that are in the trust. A whole range of technological improvements. So once that gets recognised and we can move forward, then some of them things will start coming out. That was the Australia question. One thing I will say about Australia, there was a massive hint thrown in the series on Netflix of Pine Gap, of where Australia is going and why there's a deep hatred of Mr. Trump in Australia. See if you can find it. It tells you right in your face of the path the Australian government was going. That's Pine Gap on Netflix. Final question. Is there any validity to the idea that mental development of early humans is based on the direction that migration took place? No. No. Some are coming in with certain levels of soul development from their previous lifetimes, remember. So that is the first determination. Well, unfortunately, most of them that were coming in on an astral level, because that's all they developed on the previous lifetime and we're stuck in that. But there's also other elements of then having to reconnect the chords between the different planes of the 7 earth planes of existence in this realm. And so if the child doesn't develop in the first 6 years, you read to it, you speak to it, you engage the child, that will be sufficient for that child to develop in the first 6 years to attain the etheric chord. If that child doesn't attain the etheric chord by the age of 6, then the rest of its life on a development level of learning will never progress. It can't. That's why that's the key to teaching the child. You can sing to it, you can talk to it, you can read to the child, you name it. Engage the child. Because it's important that it develops the etheric chord back again. After that, the word that was used, that which is kind of offensive to some nowadays, with the politically correct people anyway, the child will be retarded for the rest of its life. Once you don't get that chord, you're never going to develop. And that's why it's such a key stage. So either the East or the West that determined the direction of the mental development of the people that migrated from one direction to another. For example, early migration of those moving east were more spiritual. No. This is a theme. And culture, cult being the operative word, where they create cultures based on their branding of a region. And they've branded the East far more spiritual than the West. Yes, they've taught certain things, but what did they teach? They taught the Rus. The Vedic texts are not from India. We have the white race, the Rus, that were in most of the West. They were also in the East. They were also in the Middle East and the West and in America and in Britain and in Ireland. You know, we're taught that, everything from Tibet is love and light and hunky-dory. In fact, I think I've got a mention of that later on in the op-ed pieces. The Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama's cabal. He's also a former trustee. You have to analyse what we've been taught, and the reality is you have to flip it. The most spiritual place on this planet was Russia. Ever. The Rus, the Ers, and the Slavonic peoples, which was the west of Russia. Everywhere else is a creational story by them. It's what they want you to believe to take you away from what we really need to know. So no, the East is not more spiritual than us. They've just been funneled into a culture that is largely a trap. Yes, there's like all the scripture books, including the Bible, there's elements in it that are useful. There's elements in Christianity that are morally incorrect. It's just sad that the people who operate it don't operate in the same way, like the Dalai Lama. So The East is not technically more spiritual, and the West is not technically more materialistic. That's the branding program, where regions and countries are branded and cultures are created and we follow. Those cultures are not indicative to those peoples. That is a program that's been created for them to be represented to other people. I may cover more of that. I think I did a piece on culture. It was in the summer. But these are part of the things that we're unravelling of what we've been told is what we should believe, when reality is the Vedic texts, they're all very spiritual, and we all do the mandalas and the dances and sing Kumbaya. And people think that makes them more spiritual. Well, no. And everyone in the West is greedy and self-serving. No, that was the brand that was created for us, the model that was created for us, and we went along with it. Now, if this person asked me this question and we all came back in 100 years' time, you would be saying the reverse. Why? Because they were transferring all the materialistic aspects from the West to the East, and that the West would have nothing, and so would go more spiritual. It would be branded that way. They just flip it. But there's far too much being written about, oh, this is our culture, and I've heard it from Americans as well, and Brits. It's no difference. Oh, this is the British culture. And no one asks where the culture came from. It's a branding program. The whole thing is a branding program. And that's what we have to start understanding. The American people are this way because that's the American way. No, that's the branding program that was created for this country. To the rest of the world, America are the world's military bullies. But that's not the reality of American people, is it? That's how this country was branded, to look that way. And this is what we've got to understand. This is why I say countries don't matter. Cultures matter even less. We've been duped into a branding program, and we have to step out of it. We're going to have a music break, and then we're going to go into the op-ed pieces. And maybe this song is also significant, because we were not born to follow. We were born to lead. Hi all, and welcome back to the second part of tonight's show, which is an addition from last night's show. And we're going to get into some fairly heavy op-ed pieces that will complete tonight's show. And a couple of things before I go into the op-ed. With regards to things mentioned in last night and recent shows, the jury being out, I will say the jury is still out. And the second item is the feds and the traitors in the Treasury are still playing games, and I suspect they are trying to get funding from the trust for the RV programme as it stands. I can assure you that will not be happening ever. They can take that to the bank if they have any left. Read between the lines on them too. Right. Margaret Sanger. Let's see if we can get further than masturbation this time. And the Planned Parenthood. This is gonna, these next two pieces are gonna tip you upside down when you really connect the dots. Planned Parenthood is not a modern day thing, and it has its roots that go way back into the 1880s. Now this piece and the follow-up will show where it all started. The programs of division was born as far back as then, and a piece that has all the ingredients of Nazism, eugenics, occultism, psychotic tendencies, with all the usual characters in place of Jack Parsons, Darwin, Hubbard, Steiner, Blavatsky, Crowley, the Ku Klux Klan, the Democrats, the Catholic Church, and the feminism movement, all rolled into one giant future population reduction program. Now, Ms. Sanger was born in Ireland and an advocate for women's rights, but also a strong advocate for birth control, which was banned in America until hers and others' work finally managed to overturn it. She was arrested at least 8 times for expressing her views during an era in which speaking publicly about contraception was deemed illegal. This was in the 1920s. But it goes back further. Anthony Comstock, a grocery clerk and a leader in the Purity movement. Purity movement is another name for eugenics, around the same time as Darwin. And he successfully lobbied for the passage of the 1873 Comstock Act, which became a federal law prohibiting mailing of any article or thing designed or intended for the prevention of conception or procuring of abortion, as well as any form of contraceptive information. And this was, it was said at the time, was to counteract the free love movement that was prevalent in that time. And you all thought that the hippie and the free love movement was the 1960s, and that was the first public attempt at that. Clearly not. History always repeats itself. So you had the hippie love movement in the 1870s, then created the Counteract movement in the 1880s, and the new religion program called the New Age, all written in 1880s, which was later rolled out after 2 world wars and a population reductionism program. It was the 1930s before the banning of materials linked to contraception was partially overturned, and 1957 before it was fully overturned. Now, this woman, Margaret Sanger, had serious backing from somewhere. Someone was setting her up, there's no doubt about that. I just can't find records on who set her up early on. There's nowhere in her records it shows where her funds came from, particularly in the early days, for travel globally. Now, she was based in New York, and she travelled to Holland to assess and have a look at a birth control clinic in 1915. Rather expensive at the time. And, you know, I think it took about 6 or 7 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks there and 6 and 7 weeks back, plus the time spent there and the cost. It all adds up. Someone funded it. Later it became, funding became available, and it followed. She made trips then from New York to China, Korea, and also Japan. This is in the 1920s. Plus she also had the cost of setting up a clinic, which was the first of its kind in 1923. So you had the clinic and the 3 trips to Asia, all in a 5-year period. All were funded by the Rockefellers for that period. Now, after World War II, the birth control movement had accomplished the goal of making birth control legal and advocacy for reproductive rights began to focus on abortion, public funding, and also insurance coverage. And the birth control advocacy organisations around the world also began to collaborate. And so in 1946, Sanger helped found the International Committee on Planned Parenthood, which then evolved into the International Planned Parenthood Federation. Nice choice of word there, federation. Galactic Federation of Liars, and etc. And soon became the world's largest non-governmental international family planning organisation, an NGO. 1946. In 1952, in pops Rockefeller again, John D. Rockefeller III founded the influential Population Council. Oh my. And so there's that connection again that went back to the 1920s of the Rockefeller and Sanger working together. But before we go deeper in, let's just see, did their plans put in motion in the late 1800s work? In America, back in 1909, there was 30 live births per 1,000 people head of population. 30. That has plunged ever since. The baby boom that everyone, portal people and everyone talks about, oh, they've had too many children, is a quirk of statistics only. It was a small increase in the middle of a plunging drop. By 1935, the 30 births of 26 years earlier had dropped to 18. 40%, thereabouts. A drop of 12 births per 1,000 in 26 years. And during the wartime and up to the 1950s, it went back up to 26, and since then it's plunged again drastically. The baby boom era is listed as 1946 to 1964, and yet the births increase was actually only 1946 to 1950, when it reached its highest peak since 1909 of 26.5 per 1,000. By 1964, it was down to 22. Since then, by 1970, it was down to 17.5. By 77, 14.5, with a slight increase after another war, Gulf War, to 16.5 in the 1990s, and it has fallen ever since. 2004, it was 14. 2015, which is the last figures that they're prepared to give out, was 12.4. So in 106 years, we've gone from 30 births per 1,000 down to 12.4. As a point of interest with regards to the free love promiscuous movement that they all burble on about in the 1960s, the birth rate in 1960s started at 25 per 1,000 and ended that decade at 17.5. So everyone was going around banging each other, and it was all free love and let's swap partners and do all this and that, and yet the birth rates collapsed. Now, some of it was in part to the use of condoms, not all. Doesn't explain a 30% drop in one decade. And with regards to the rise of the feminism movement in the middle of the 1960s, the rate was 23 per 1,000. It's now 12.4. A 50% drop in live births. This is the desecration of marriages and families. that the real reason behind the feminism movement was designed to create. So now you can all see how these programs work, all very silently in the background. They'll give you a reason why this is happening, and there's 2, 3 and 4 other reasons that are hidden. And also how largely we are all oblivious to their intentions, but not no more, not with shows like this and many others on the internet. It's being exposed. Now, Sanger herself was riddled with contradictory thinking, which was the theme of last week's show, was it not? And Sanger wrote that masturbation was dangerous, according to her. She stated, in my personal opinion, an experience as a trained nurse while attending persons afflicted with various and often revolting diseases. Nice terminology for a nurse there. No matter what their ailments, I never found anyone so repulsive as a chronic masturbator. It would not be difficult to fill page upon page of heart-rending confessions made by young girls. It's girls she's referring to, not men, whose lives were blighted by this precarious habit, always begun so innocently. I bet that surprised you all. You all thought it was about men. No. But the contradictory part of it is it not the case that masturbation, male or female, prevents pregnancies, which is exactly what she was allegedly fighting for? It's not really. That's the illusion. That's the sleight of hand. What is wrong with self-love? Nothing. It is being connected to oneself. But of course the church and others in the programme don't want people going inward, do they? And there is the key. Everything has to be external and outside of themselves, and then restrict free love as well. And it's all a total classic mind fuckery. Pure and simple. It's a program. So what happens then is people are unsure of which role or mode they need to be in. It's the same word that came up last week again. Dichotomy. A division or contrast between two things that are or are represented as being opposed or entirely different. Like I said, mindfuckery. And they've done this many times on many subjects. Maybe the problem is she was raised a devout Catholic, which she was, where sex was almost considered a crime in any form. Contraception was banned by the church, whilst the ones who made those rules were committing all kinds of heinous sexual crimes on their parishioners, and still to this day. Rules for one and rules for another. So she advocated for women's rights and women's rights to have sex without the burden of pregnancy responsibility, which is fine to me. She said she also was supportive of homosexuality and was also declared non-racist. Again, all sounds good to me. But her statements, she said otherwise, and was highly controversial and contradictory in equal measure, as you will hear. So here's a list of some of the statements made by Margaret Sanger. Starting in 1918, these are all in date order. You see how worse it gets as time goes on. All of our problems are a result of overbreeding amongst the working class. knowledge of birth control is essentially moral. Its general, though prudent, practice must lead to a higher individuality and ultimately a cleaner race. 1918 again. No more children should be born when the parents, though healthy themselves, find that their children are physically or mentally defective. 1919. And she mentions the word that she didn't. She should have done in 1918. Eugenics without birth control seems to us a house built upon the sands. It is at the mercy of the rising stream of the unfit. 1920. The most merciful thing that the large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. This was a nursery member. I'm glad she didn't treat me. 1920 again. The most serious evil of our times is that of encouraging the bringing into the world of large families. The most immoral practice of the day is breeding too many children. 1920 again. Birth control itself, often denounced as a violation of natural law, technically it is nothing more or less than the facilitation of the process of weeding out the unfit, of the preventing of birth of defects or of those who will become defectives. If we are to make racial progress, this development of womanhood must precede motherhood in every individual woman. Oh dear. 1921. As an advocate of birth control, I wish to take advantage, nice wording, of the present opportunity, again nice wording, telling you right in your face, to point out that the unbalance between the birth rate of the unfit and the fit, admittedly the greatest present menace to civilization, can never be rectified by the inauguration of a cradle competition between the two classes. That was wrote in the Eugenic Value of Birth Control propaganda book. Right in your face. Like I said, it's connecting dots. 1921 again. The most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the over-fertility of the mentally and physically defective. 22. Organised charity itself is the symptom of a malignant social disease. 1922 again. Feeble-mindedness perpetuates itself from the ranks of those who are blandly indifferent to their racial responsibilities, and it is largely this type of humanity we are now drawing upon to populate our world for the generations to come. In this orgy of multiplying and replenishing the earth, this type of pari passu, multiplying and perpetuating those direst evils in which we must, if civilization is to survive, and extirpate by the very root, in other words, eliminate. In these two words, 1923 now, birth control sums up our whole philosophy. It means the release and cultivation of the better elements in our society. One must ask, who decides who is better and who is not? What's it based on? And the gradual suppression, elimination and eventual extinction of defective stocks. Those human weeds which threaten the blooming of the finest flowers of American civilization. Told you she'd get worse, didn't I, as time went on. Then she went kind of missing speech-wise for 9 years. Maybe that's when she was arrested several times. Or too busy in Japan and Korea and China. Christ, if you went to those countries now, you'd be classed as a terrorist. You know. Where are we? 1932. Apply a stern and rigid policy of sterilisation and segregation to that grade of population whose progeny is tainted, or whose inheritance is such that objectionable traits may be transmitted to offspring. 1932 again. My own position is that the Catholic doctrine is illogical, not in accord with science, and definitely goes against social welfare and race improvement. 1934. A marriage licence shall in itself give husband and wife only the right to a common household and not the right to parenthood. 1934 again. No woman should have the legal right to bear a child, and no man shall have the right to become a father without a permit for parenthood. 1934 again. Permits for parenthood shall be issued upon an application by city, county or state authorities to married couples, providing they are financially able to support the expected child, have the qualifications needed for proper rearing of the child, have no transmissible diseases, and on the woman's part no medical indication that maternity is likely to result in death or permanent injury to health. 1934 again. No permit for parenthood shall be valid for more than one birth. All very China there. 1938. I accepted an invitation, listen closely, to talk to the women's branch of the Ku Klux Klan. I was escorted to the platform, was introduced and began to speak. In the end, through simple illustrations, I believed I had accomplished my purpose. A dozen invitations to speak to similar groups were proffered. 1939. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. 1947. In an interview with Jack Parsons. But for my view, I believe that there should be no more babies. Final one, 1957. I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they are born. That to me is the greatest sin that people can and do commit. As you can all hear now, it's contradictory. A nurse who is interested in women's rights. Is any of those statements bear those two facts out? No. It's classic programme doublespeak, the sleight of hand tactic that's often used in the alternative media, the mainstream media, whereby they start off with a programme that on the face of it delivers good things for the people, but it hides behind a mask of a programme with real dark intentions. Now, the classic example of this is the New Age movement, 1880s again, which funny enough started with some of the same people that were mentioned at the beginning of this piece. New Age was an alternative religious program, all prepared back in the 1880s for when the public started to walk away from organised religion. They knew it was coming. They always know it's coming. the technology they have, and the recordings of the loops, they know it's coming, just that we never. So it's all love and light and lovey-dovey, but with a twist behind it, oblivious to many. It was another organised trap that was set for many people. Sleepwalking people into training camps of mind control, better known as Waldorf Steiner schools. You all go into the woods and hold hands and sing Kumbaya, which was written, funny enough, in the 1920s. Coincidence? Nope. Kumbaya, my Lord. Oh dear. A calling song for Anu. Come here, my Anu, that song means. Invoking the master to come here and reign over us. Kumbaya is a word magic spell song. Oops. It's passed off as being about peace. But look at the title. Kumbaya, my Lord. Come here, my Anu. And whilst people are off into the woods singing Kumbaya, they carried on their sinister programs while you invoked the Lord. The classic distraction program, where people think by being New Age they're bucking the system, and in reality are obliviously sleepwalking into a new program of their making. We'll have a musical break and we'll be back with more of this. Hi all, and welcome back to the final portion of tonight's show. If you thought that was bad enough, shocking enough, surprising enough, we have more. The birth rates wasn't the zinger. So Ms. Sanger, or Mrs. Sanger, whatever it was called, it being the operative word, was one of several programs that ran from the 1880s through the 1920s, which set the stage for their future and our modern day programs. This is the gist of this piece. The 1880s brought us Blavatsky, the New Age program. Albert Pike brought us the, not prophecies, but the facts that they were going to planning 3 world wars. In rolled Rudolf Steiner, again talking nice things with a hidden agenda. Then came Crowley, and on to Hubbard and Parsons, Scientology, then into the New Age program, which was started in 1880, and the channeling programs. Now all of them have elements of not necessarily the truth, which they did, but more of it was a case of what you wanted to hear. It's the classic fishing program technique, where they lure you onto the line and you can't see the hook at the end of it. Even when people see the hook, they go into Stockholm Syndrome style behaviour due to investing so much time into it, and rather than feeling or looking stupid by admitting they went on a wrong path, which we have all done several times, they will defend it to the point of total insanity. The classic example is the RV people. But the main one is religion. Now that has some way to go yet before it fully reveals itself to the many, the pure folly of following that program. But nearly all of our current ills stems from that time period, 1880s through 1920. It set forward the future programs. The Federal Reserve, Nazism, eugenics and the research programs now known as the Black Budgets. Genocide of many in World War I. Genocide of the people of Rus and the Slavic Aryans, which set the stage for the reverse program 20 years later, with the Nazis and their white-only Aryan race, which was seeding the populist program. It was never totally about the Aryan race or white only, but to get the public to hate all things white. And at a later date, then link it with the Aryan program and proverbially kill two birds with one stone. An example of this is Black Lives Matter. Of course their lives matter, but they fail to see it's another program, because all lives matter. The Aryan program was sowing the seeds for a future program. Get everyone against the idea of white only, as that is Nazi. That is Aryan super race. BS. No, it was a hidden agenda for their next plan. Not to eliminate the blacks. No, eliminate the whites. The next bit will shock you all. In the 1920s, white peoples were 30+% of the world's population. That figure is now down to 12. 2/3 of the white people's demographic have gone in under 100 years. Just think about that for a second. 2/3 of one species gone. Yet where is the Save the Whites program? White Lives Matter. Save the Whites charities. Or public concerns of how to protect the whites. There is none. Why? Quite simple. They were trying to erase that group. Because all the other groups, their population numbers have gone up, but only one's gone down by 2/3. And no one saw it. There is no white power groups allowed now, remember. Why? Because of the program that was etched into the people's psyche, the equivalent of looking at a midday sun for longer than a few seconds by the Nazis. It's etched into our psyche. White power or white people is fascist, racist, violent and divisive. Oh, the irony of all those words. So you see how easy it is to set it all up over time, and also how few could work out the real agenda behind it. Only critical thinking will arrive any researcher to his destination. To the rest, you are stuck in the same station for the rest of your life, following a narrative that these think tank groups have all laid out for you. They plant the seeds, but it is we the people who grow them. By blindly following their script and their plans, and we have to stop doing that and reverse the course with thinking and narrative. People will ask, why eliminate the whites? The common sense answer is the whites are their biggest threat. One could argue we are the most creative colour. That's not said to denigrate the other colours, but many of the creative ideas, not necessarily the delivery of the ideas, because sadly in most cases coloured slavery was used for that, have all come from the white race. So if you connect the dots and eliminate 70 to 90 million Rus, eliminate the Slavonic Aryans, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Romania, all that area, Macedonia, Georgia, including parts of Turkey, Syria and Iran, which means land of the Aryans. It's also where the original kingdom of Manna was. Decimated Europe in World War II, then flooded it with migrants, created fear programs of all things Aryan via the Nazis, and the stage is set. Do you see the pattern now? Because once you see the pattern, then you start connecting the dots. The reality of was it was setting the stage for the next program of World War III, clash of the civilizations, Muslims versus the Christians. If people actually did their own research, they'll realise they're just one and the same. A Muslim sect arose out of the Christian movement. It's the same people. It's like Protestants. They're really Catholics. Split them up, get them arguing with each other, get them fighting. Same thing. So World War III was designated for 1990, which is why the Gulf War started in 1991. Setting the stage. Which would have led to the destruction of the Middle East, Europe and the Americas. Setting the stage for Eastern control, as it was all arranged back in the same time period, back in 1912. The Russian Holocaust was done, same time period. The 6 million Jews figure was imprinted into people's psyche, same time period. The Balfour Declaration, the elimination in World War I of 20 to 50 million Chinese. Has anyone asked how 20 million, never mind 50 million Chinese were killed, or by whom, when they never left their borders? Planned Parenthood, occultism and Crowley, the Steiner narrative, the takeover of Ireland, the takeover of the world's finances via the Federal Reserve, the changing of people's cultures and boundaries, the creation of the wealth families like the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Rothschilds and the Warburgs, all kicking into a new gear. And people thought the Nazis in the 1940s were the worst. No, that was the sleight of hand again. These same people, groups and programs were all implemented 50 or so years prior. And yet humanity 100 years later is still paying for the price for that time period, particularly in the financial sector. The sinking of the Olympic, not the Titanic, heralding the real dark ages of humanity. In essence, the ship sinking is symbolic of the sinking of the white race. And from where I'm standing, it's the elephant in the room. The classic sleight of hand appear to target one group but actually manipulating another. But it also symbolises the fall of humanity in many ways. We have descended into the pit, and we have a long climb to get back out. Ultimately, that rests in each and every one of us to make that climb. Final piece tonight was in regards to something mentioned last night. Where are all the good guys? And the reply in the Series 100, there are none. That is more true in the highest levels than people think. All bought and paid to play their game. Now, there is a few that got trapped up in the system, but for the majority, it is in them all along to be that way. Cabal go on profiling from a young age and categorise if people fit into certain modes or roles. So those people, it's in their DNA, so to speak, to begin with. Like the core pirate structure, it's all about how far you can trample all over your work colleagues to get to the so-called top. The reality is, you are nowhere near the top as you thought. You all just bought into the illusion of being important. Even some of the 301 bloodline families have found out to their cost recently. They thought they were top of the tree. Then it all gets taken off them for the higher order. And then we come to our level, we the people, of where are all the good guys? Now, there's many good people, lots of them. But one, will they wake up? Two, if they do wake up, how far will they go to be the change? Three, are they prepared in some cases to sacrifice their lifestyle to get involved? Four, will they accept heightened levels of abuse and ridicule? 5, will they put their life on hold while doing so? 6, will they be bought off to shut up or stand down? And 7, will they literally put their life on the line for the cause? 7 big questions that all can ask of themselves. And the reality is very few will do all 7. And therein lies the issue, does it not? Just how far are you prepared to go to change not only your life, but everyone else's? It's a big sacrifice that sadly only the few are prepared to make, fighting for a cause that is greater than you. Those people are few and far between. We know. We have observed it. And the key is, like the 100 series, you have to create good guys by joining up together. Overlapping circles of people that eventually form the pattern of the flower of life. That is our task ahead. And if you really want change, more people have to have the fortitude to do all 7 of the above mentioned. One of my biggest bugbears in America is the so-called militia. Training in the woods forever and a day, it seems. Militia groups, of course, were highly prevalent around the alt media, particularly 2009 through 2014, when they started to be called out, and then they vanished. And they were coming online, including my former show, that they were going to do this and they were going to do that and I'm going to do the other. The reality is they did jack. Now, I know there are many passionate militia around the country who are willing to do what their affiliation stands for. But sadly, those affiliations was riddled with anti-American agents, agency spooks, and also cowards. The minute they were asked to do anything of note, they all turned tail and ran. Fine running round the woods and shooting animals for sport, it seems, but when it comes to real action, off they ran, hiding behind legalese. Oh, we can't do that, it's illegal. Really? But our whole system of government is illegal, and that's okay, is it? The militia was formed to step in if a government went rogue. Supposedly, anyway. And the question is, how rogue has it got to be before they act? I rarely give myself any praise, as it's not really in my nature. But you people should be utterly ashamed that a Brit has done more to try and correct the ills of this country than all of you combined. And that applies to all Americans who haven't stood up enough as well. This is your country. You were all born here. I wasn't. Proud to be American, many of you sing, but not proud enough to protect and fight for your fellow Americans. It's shameful and a national embarrassment. And it's time some stood up and showed some backbone. Real backbone. This is your country, not theirs. You were all born here. But I will tell you now, your country, I'm telling you, is now in a death spiral. There's no way two ways about it. And that's not a throwaway line. It's a fact. We are dying by a death of 1,000 cuts. And the people, by and large, have ignored it. 330 million people, and yet only a few bother. There's only 350,000 clowns and minions out of 330 million. Whilst many people are pandering to psychopaths like the Bushes, Clintons, Cheneys, Rumsfelds, voted for people who are known sex offenders, voted for Nazis, hello, Brown, Pelosi, Feinstein, and voted for the mentally challenged like Pelosi and Waters, to name but a few. You voted for them all. They never forced you to vote, you just followed orders. But you've forgotten you have your own choice, not theirs. Triality thinking, not duality thinking. The glorious human creation that we are, as mentioned in the Q&A earlier, reduced to cowering, fear, personal and collective apathy, acceptance of slavery, and acceptance of crimes that are the most heinous things I've ever heard. Acceptance of child abuse, child sex slavery, child harvesting, and child ritual abuse, torture and death. And yet the majority of you in this country just ignore it. Proud to be an American. Not in my book. And it's time this country and its people collectively stepped into reality. Military people doing jack. Treasury people committing sins and treason. Government people also. And they walk amongst us. With a militia. The only country left with guns. And they won't use them. I don't advocate violence. Never have done. But the gun doesn't have to be used for violence. It can be used as a deterrent. And yet the militia has done nothing. The important thing is not whether we get funding, or whether there's Russian collusion or not, or whether Hillary has done 2,000 crimes or just one. The important thing is you all fight to save this country. It's dying. The financials are gone. There's nothing left. We have no military, no government, no constitution, no currency, no banks, no rights for legal representation. You don't own your car, you don't own your home, you don't own your possessions or your bank accounts. And worse still, you have no rights to your own children. And we tolerate this shit and spend time arguing whether the earth is flat or round. Time we used our source damn brains we were all born with for once, and fight not only for this country but this planet, but for the very survival of our species. And again, that's not a throwaway line, it's a fact. Whilst Black Lives Matter, your population numbers have gone up, the whites has gone down 2/3, and nobody noticed. JFK's words ring in the ears. Ask not what you can do for your country, or ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. The reality is the country has done nothing for us. So ask, what can you do for your people? Like I said, this is your country, not mine. I'm proud to be here and live American. But it's both sad and shameful to me that a Brit has stood up more for this country than the majority of Americans have, including those in the higher office. And it's time for us all to do your part, methinks, and reverse that path. Like I said, I'm proud to be a representative of America and live here. But how many of the 330 million can really say they've done their part in saving the peoples of this country? This has been The Truth on Our Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. I'm going to leave you with a reminder of Reagan's speech, and given what it was yesterday, we're going to end with the song Love Conquers All. It's time we all learned to love each other. Bye for now.
Ours was the first revolution in the history of mankind that truly reversed the course of government, and with three little words: we the people. We the people tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. We the people are the driver. The government is the car, and we decide where it should go and by what route and how fast. Almost all the world's constitutions are documents in which governments tell the people what their privileges are. Our Constitution is a document in which we, the people, tell the government what it is allowed to do. We, the people, are free. This belief has been the underlying basis for everything I've tried to do these past 8 years. But back in the 1960s, when I began, it seemed to me that we'd begun reversing the order of things. that through more and more rules and regulations and confiscatory taxes, the government was taking more of our money, more of our options, and more of our freedom. I went into politics in part to put up my hand and say, stop. I was a citizen politician, and it seemed the right thing for a citizen to do. I think we have stopped a lot of what needed stopping, and I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is as neat and predictable as a law of physics. As government expands, liberty contracts.